what we'll do is just, I'll say a few words very, very quickly from Lawrence Julian's poem, which we entirely recognise. James will then sound the last post. We all know what to do, hopefully, stand up simply. And then we'll do 2 minutes silence thereafter, followed by the reveille, and then I'll finish off, and then we'll lay our wreaths with Malcolm. Go first, please. Lay your wreaths at the foot of the plinth, like so. No rush at all, so just take your time. That would be perfect. And then I'll finish off with a few words if you're happy with that. Is that really straightforward? Brilliant. Okay. So I'm going to slide into Are you happy? Great. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor their years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. When you go home today, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this morning's short ceremony. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you for coming. It's a cold morning. Hopefully you're all going to get the opportunity to have a quick on behalf of the RAF it's an honour and privilege to be associated with this fantastic edifice, and our job is to make sure that it is maintained in perpetuity. Is something we take very seriously. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Before you all go, I don't know whether any of you know, we, the Command Memorial Group, hold an unofficial ceremony from 10:30 onwards, and we hold another silence as well, so you're welcome to join us. We have readings, poems, and we have memories of those that we've lost or those that served and inspired. So you're welcome to join us again.
Thank you very much.
Whenever I see them ride on high, gleaming and proud in the morning sky, or lying awake in bed at night, I hear them pass on their outward flight. I feel the mass of metal and guns, delicate instruments, deadweight tons, awkward, slow, bomb racks full, straining away from downward pull, straining away from home and base, and trying to see the pilot's face. I imagine a boy who's just left school, on whose quick learned skill and courage call depend the lives of the men in his crew and the success of the job they have to do. And something happens to me inside that is deeper than grief, greater than pride. And though there is nothing I can say, I always look up as they go on their way and care and pray for everyone, to steel my heart to say I will be done. Sorry. Gets me every time.
Thank you. My reading is come from a book by Mr. Steve Darlow, who writes a lot of books about our veterans. westward. The last of the Creepies. My father was a rear gunner and was shot down over Schleswig, and he was in Lambsdorff, AB in Poland. And we were also on the Long March, which many of you may have heard of, that when at the end of the war, the Germans heard the advancing of the Russians towards their borders. They got all the prisoners of war out of the camps and marched them westward in sub-zero temperatures. When he died from starvation and dysentery, from just sheer exhaustion and cold. A couple of short excerpts is from this book and from Air Commodore Charles Clark, who was at Stalag 3, of course, famous for the Great Escape. My dad's second pilot took part in the Great Escape and was one of the 15 who was shot. So this is just a few to give you some idea of conditions. As some people thought when these men got taken into custody, they were in like holiday camps. They closed the shutters at dusk and the lights went out at 10 o'clock. This was a time called the quiet period in the afternoon. You were not allowed to even whisper because everyone was reading. It was a deliberate attempt to enjoy some peace and it was self-imposed. It wasn't the Germans insisting. We were very short of food and often we didn't receive a regular cross box. Occasionally we get a German loaf of bread made out of sawdust and you could almost see the splinters in it. In the whole camp there was one bread making machine and sometimes you could book a slot on that but rarely. You would cut the loaf as thinly as you could so that you could get as many slices as possible. They would be brought back and the slices put on the table. Then you would cut the cards with the choice of just one slice in case one had more splinters than the other. Occasionally, creaky glue, God knows what it was, had weevils floating in it. It came in a pail and you ladled it out and cut cards who had the choice of the bowl, and then you cut cards again to see who would lick the container. The currency in the camp was cigarettes. Each food parcel had 50 in them, but of course the Americans and Canadians were duty free, and for some reason or other, the Germans allowed those in. We had an exchange shop called Budako, and everything was priced in numbers of cigarettes. A chocolate or Hershey bar would be 1,000 cigarettes. I used to save my cigarettes and get a Hershey bar. I would clean my teeth at night, we had no toothpaste, and then I would get into my pit, as we call it, get a little knob of chocolate, put it in the middle of my tongue, and see how long it lasted. It was a great treat. In this second is just a glimpse of the when the Russians came near, they were 20 miles away. You could hear the guns. We were delighted that we were going to be free. Suddenly the Germans decided to move us. We probably had an inkling of this a day or two beforehand because I made a pack. I got a shirt and stitched it so I could put it on my shoulder. And in the last hour or so I made a sledge. We marched out in the early hours of the morning, the 28th January. It was minus 28 degrees. There was a blizzard and we weren't dressed for it. The Germans had made no arrangements for food or accommodation and we didn't even know where we were going. Anyway, we marched, trudged rather than marched actually, and it was 36 hours before we stopped outside the camp. There were camp beds, but the people who didn't get in got frostbite, and the chaps who took their boots off had trouble getting them back on because the footwear was closed. The following day we tramped out. The guards didn't really know what was happening. I was in what we called a convoy, 3 of us, myself and 2 others, both from 617 Squad. On one night, however, it was delightful. We stayed in a glass factory and it was warm. I remember holding a little tin, a Yorkshire pudding, and putting that on in a glass oven and cooking it and munching it. Eventually, we reached Remembrance and the warehouses by the station. We were put in cattle trucks, about 50 in each, and I had no idea where we were going. We all had dysentery by then and just 1 bucket for each truck. The advantage was it was en suite, but at least we can imagine stench. Right?
Yes. My father was in 7th Squadron with my brother, but today and reading a poem from a friend about Binbrook, the airfield in Lincolnshire, which closed down in 1988. During the war, it was the Australian Squadron 460, and I've got a piece here which is written by a dear friend for the visitors that go to Binbrook. It was also Squadron, it was 12 Squadron and 142 Squadron. And it's very short, it's quite moving for our overseas Australians and all others actually. And I'll start it now. You came and these souls will be joyful that your heart heard the call of their loss, as their last home holds them in peace, here so far from the Southern Cross. Their homeland was that of Australia, though other nations too lost their young men to a selfish impulse that drew them here to die for you. So heed well as you walk remembering, with their soft voices or mournful sigh, as they come unseen around you, for they had no wish to die. Take with you the peace of their sacrifice, take with you the love in their tears, and forget not their sacred memory, no matter the span of your years. And that was written by Mark Chandler, Ray Whiteley, on the 25th of September 2016. Thank you.
So on the 15th of March 1944, flight ND474 took off the mission to drop bombs over Stuttgart. In that crew was 7 people, 7 of those who didn't return. One of them was my great uncle. So each year we come here to remember them and everyone else who unfortunately passed. So this poem's called High Flight, and it's by Petty Officer John Gillespie McGee, who's part of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheel and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And, while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. So the flight actually crashed. It was shot down and crashed near a village in Bolsten in Germany. So the story goes, the villagers pulled out the 7 crew from the burning wreck, buried them in their own churchyard. They were then later moved to a war memorial. But every year the villagers will be doing this very ceremony. They'll be praying for them. So the humility that they showed in such a time as war was something which really hits home with us as the family members of the seven people of the crew. So we should remember them and thank them each year that we come to do this. Thank you very much.
As you can see, there's several groups here that have got family members that were lost or that were shot down and were prisoners of war. You've heard about Linda's father and one of her crew who was in the Great Escape. My uncle and his crew were shot down. My uncle signed up age 20, so he was very young. His rear gunner was 19, the youngest on the crew. There were 2 from the New Zealand Air Force. The pilot was an Australian, but he had joined the New Zealand Air Force, and he was the oldest. He was 28. There was also the observer. He was 23, I believe. He came from somewhere near Christchurch in New Zealand. So it wasn't just the British volunteers, it was volunteers from across the Commonwealth who came to help us at that time. Now my uncle, he flew 12 flights with Bomber Command, and they were shot down on the 8th of April 1942, somewhere between here and Hamburg. That was their raid. I've been researching for the last 6 years as to what happened to them, and I'm that close, I think, fingers crossed, to finding where the plane is. And that is my goal, to kind of give them a final closure for the fans, closure for them, do a memorial service. So it was Pilot Officer Noel Morse from the New Zealand Air Force, Flight Sergeant George Hilary Vaughan from the New Zealand Air Force, Flight Sergeant James Linehan, my uncle, and Sergeant Norman Naylor, who was the first wireless op, Sergeant Graham Lakeman, who was related to Seth Lakeman, the folk singer, and Dan Lakeman, who was a veteran of the D-Day campaign, and also the last one, the rear gunner, was Roland Richards. Now he signed up, as I said, underage. He lied about his name, he lied about his age, and it took me several years to find him. But the family didn't know what had happened to him because the RAF didn't think he existed because he had lied about his details. This is the length that these young men went to, and they were barely out of school. So this is why this is so important. We have this ceremony every year and remember them. I'm going to introduce you to Simon now. Simon's going to do his reading.
Good morning. Some people might think I'm here slightly because of fraud, because I've got a multi-interest in the actions of our servicemen, Air Force, Merchant Navy and Army. But I want to tell you a story, an extract from Guy Gibson's book, Enemy Coast Ahead. It refers to Hoppy Hopgood in M for Mother. And when he joined 617, Gibson thought a lot of Hopgood, and that's why he made him his deputy. And he was an excellent flyer, marvellous flyer. And he had a problem with the bomb aimer and navigator that he brought with him from 106 Squadron, and so he got a couple of replacements from 50 Squadron, one of whom was a chap called John Fraser, the Canadian. And you may well have seen in the last year or two quite controversial newspaper articles and in the media about how a man, we refuse to use the word gentleman, a man stole John Fraser's logbooks from Dolly, John's widow in Canada. He purportedly got them on loan, and what he's done with them he has not been prepared to admit to anybody. But anyway, and John Fraser, after the war, when he married Dolly, he had 2 children. The son he named John after John Hopgood. He called him John Hopgood Fraser. And his daughter he called Shear, after the village of Shear in Surrey, where Hopgood was brought up as a child. Shear happens to be over here in Lincolnshire at the moment for the Dam Busters dinner. Anyway, when they were gathering by the Mona Dam, lots of things were happening, and after Gibson's run he did dummy runs to help escort in the next aircraft to be dropping the mine. And here we go. We waited about 10 minutes, but it seemed hours to us. It must have seemed even longer to Hoppy, who was the next to attack. Meanwhile, all the fighters had now collected over our target. They knew our game by now. But we were flying too low for them. They could not see us, and then there were no attacks. At last, hello, M Mother. You may attack now. Good luck. Okay, attacking. Hoppy, the Englishman, casual but very efficient. Keen now on only one thing, which was war. And he began his attack. He began going down over the trees where I'd come from a few moments before. We could see his spotlights quite clearly, slowly closing together as he ran across the water. We saw him approach. The flak, by now, had got an idea from which direction the attack was coming, and they let him have it. When he was about 100 yards away, someone said hoarsely over the RT, "Hell, he has been hit." Now, unbeknown to Gibson, Hopwood's plane and for Mother had been hit previously by flak about 20 minutes before the attack on the Mona Down. Hopwood received a head injury, and he didn't realise quite at the time, but his front gunner had been killed as well. Then Mother was on fire. An unlucky shot had got him in one of the inboard petrol tanks, and a long jet of flame was beginning to stream out. I saw him drop his mine, but his bomb aimer must have been wounded. The bomb aimer was John Fraser. He must have been wounded because it fell straight on to the powerhouse on the other side of the dam. But Hoppy staggered on, trying to gain altitude so his crew could bail out. When he got up to about 500 feet, there was a livid flash in the sky and one wing fell off. His aircraft disintegrated and fell to the ground in cascading, flaming fragments. There it began to burn quite gently and rather sinisterly in a field some 3 miles beyond the dam. Someone said, "Poor old Hoppy." Well, in attaining that extra height, Hopgood gave the chance to 3 of his crew, Fraser, Minchin and Bircher. And approximately 500 feet, they parachuted out. But Minchin was badly injured and he didn't survive the parachute drop. Fraser and Bircher did. Both were captured and taken prisoner. Neither ever forgot the heroic gesture by Hopgood which saved their lives. And as I previously said, Fraser went back to Canada after the war and named his son John Hopgood Fraser. His daughter was named Shear. Hopgood, Brennan, Earnshaw, Minchin and Gregory are buried together in the Rheinberg War Cemetery in Germany. A very personal account. I'm very fortunate, as some of us in the Facebook group do know Shear, and we chat through the medium quite regularly. And a remarkable family, but they were tremendously saddened by this loss to the family of John Fraser's logbooks. As to whether they will ever see light of day again, that so-called man has got to own up to the fact, and he's doing prison time at the moment for the theft of those books. Thank you very much. In a couple of moments will be the appropriate time when we will recite those famous words for Remembrance Sunday. If there's anybody else who wants to offer a couple of minutes contribution, please do come forward. We'll be delighted to hear what you have to say.
Didn't you mention that your relative was in the area?
We're all part of NC.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay, all right, right. We've got a couple of minutes before we do the exaltation, so if you'd like to speak.
I'd just like to say a few words. I've handed out some leaflets about a new memorial that is being built as we speak in Lincoln. It's just outside. Originally, it was going to be a memorial for the men who flew out of the Lincoln Airfield, Lincolnshire Airfield. But now it's expanded and it's going to commemorate all of Bomber Command. On a hill there is this beautiful spire. The height of it is the equivalent of Lancaster wingspan. Around it on the walls of steel are cut out the names of all those who gave their lives. So if you have a relative who gave their life in the service of Bomber Command, they will be there, and you can go and see them. It will be opening, there'll be a soft opening this year, and it will open officially in April. They're still trying to raise £1 million to finish it off. There's going to be a peace garden. There's a huge education centre where you can go and see exhibitions and learn about the men of Bomber Command, learn about the people who were left behind, their families, the ground crew, the staff, and also those who were affected by the bombing campaign. And it's not only a centre for learning about the men of Bomber Command, but also the effects for everybody. It's just the whole. It's a snapshot of that whole era of these men who were forgotten for all these years. Their service was forgotten. Their contribution was forgotten.
Can I just say that Linda has just completed a charity walk from here all the way to the Bomber Command Memorial in Lincoln. I think it was an incredible feat, Linda. Well done.
They sort of said, "Oh, it's my long march." Oh my goodness, it's just so little. It's so little to my own personal sort of homage to them. We can't imagine. We can't imagine what these young men went through and what they sacrificed. But at this centre, at this new centre in Lincoln, you will be able to access first-hand accounts from all the veterans, from what they saw, what they did, what it was like. You'll be able to see documents, memorabilia, anything that associates. And if any of you have any items, photographs, documents, they would be happy if you get in touch with them. They give you details of how to scan them. You don't have to give them up to the centre. You can scan them in, and they will be protected and looked after. And then if people want to access them to find out more information of what it was like, they can do. At last, people will be able to see the story, not written by historians, but written by the people who were there.
Okay, it's now time for the exaltation.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.